Hey, Jim,
Yes.
we need to make two other changes
Okay.
besides the one we talked about. If you noticed, for some reason, we ended up with two Gs on the agenda.
On superintendents or treasurers?
Yes, on superintendents. So there's a G, then an H, everybody. I'm
Oh,
not
yeah.
sure how that happened, but
Okay, YouTube is working. We are live on YouTube.
Okay.
So anyone
if
that's
you
always
would,
wanted to be a YouTube
Jim,
star,
and the rest of the board members on E, we need to change the date to 07/31/2022.
So Jack, the iPhone that just joined is Ron.
okay.
I'm sorry, Bob,
At
on
least
that.
on my screen, he's showing up under Dale and next to Chris Wolf and Kristen Thomas in between there.
Bob, is that E, additional class periods?
It is the right part.
That doesn't seem the right one.
It's under treasurer's consent items, not mine. I'm sorry.
Okay. And that should be, I'm sorry, which one?
It should be E and it should say 7/31/2022.
Okay.
Hey, Ron, if you can hear us, can you start your video so Jack can find you in the screen?
7 iPhones listed.
We found Ron or not?
I'm looking at the box that I believe is him, but I can't send it a private chat.
And I try to unmute the one I think is him.
Sure. And if I see it go on mute, then I'll say you hit the right one.
Oh, it's not letting me.
Uh-oh, it just moved. Maybe
Yep, it's gone.
he's probably logging in as something else.
Everyone is on the phone. We're waiting for one more board member to get in, and then we'll get started very shortly.
There he is.
I can rename him. Hey, Ron, can you hear us? Oh, he's muted.
Hello?
Hey, Ron.
Can you hear us
Okay,
okay?
you guys good? Yeah, I can.
Jack, are we ready to get started on your end? You're on mute, I know.
We are ready.
Okay. Everybody else can hear me okay? Dale, you good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Stovey, and I am the president of the Avon Lake Board of Education. This is our July 14th meeting. I'm going to go through a couple introductory comments in a minute just to talk about the meeting, but as part of our normal process, we need to take a roll to get the meeting started. So I will ask Autumn to call the roll for tonight's meeting.
Mr. Krakis?
Yeah.
Mr. Yance?
Here.
Mr. Sherbin?
Here.
Mrs. Rosansky?
Here.
Mr. Stovey?
Here. Typically, our next step on the agenda is that we all stand and rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance. And while we're not all in person together, Dr. DB is going to cue up a flag for us, and we will try to do the Pledge of Allegiance virtually together. So we'll give him a second here. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, Jen. All right, as we get the screen back here, just a couple introductory comments. As a Board of Education, we normally meet monthly, at least once a month, and this is our regularly scheduled meeting for July. We typically have a very small audience, so this will break the all-time school board attendance record, as I think we have over 225 people that are on Zoom and others that are watching on YouTube. But just a little bit of background on how our meetings run. Typically, when we start a meeting, if we have a special presentation, we will have first, and then we have kind of the business part of our meeting with our treasurer's report and superintendent's report, where we go through general business matters of the district. Tonight, I know many of you are tuned in because you are interested in the first part of our agenda, which is our back to school update. So Dr. DB and Mr. Scott are going to walk through some slides that we put together, and they will give you some additional background. We'll be doing some questions from the board back to two of them about the plan and so forth. Unfortunately, in the setting that we're in, we can't virtually conduct a Q&A session with obviously 230 people back and forth. So hopefully people had a chance to email questions ahead of time. We will be taking feedback after the meeting, and obviously there'll be a lot of follow-up and so forth. And I did want to also say that, you know, we went to this format with the Zoom meetings in April when schools were closed down, and we will be returning to live in-format meetings in August. So we appreciate all of your patience. We're going to try and get this technology working. If we have a snafu, we might need to pause for a minute to get somebody back online, because we, as part of our rules, we do need to have all the board members online throughout this meeting. But we'll keep our fingers crossed that we don't get any storms or any technical difficulties, and we'll try and get started from here. So Dr. DB, do you want to start with queuing up the presentation and give some background?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Stobie. I'm going to get the presentation up and
Jack, do you want me to take over responsibility of admitting people?
that'll be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to share my screen and we will begin the presentation now. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you and welcome to the back to school plan. I want to spend a little bit of time just letting you know how this plan came together and then going through all of the aspects of it. There will be plenty of opportunity for people to ask questions, and we'll share some of that information as well. I do want to let all of the parents in the audience know that you'll be receiving a copy of this tomorrow in School Messenger, and staff members, you'll be receiving a copy of this in your email this evening. So first is I want to talk about the plan development. We've actually started working on the plan back in late April. In late April, we put together a district planning team, which looked at a lot of scenarios, including full remote, a lot of time spent on talking about a blended approach, and then in-person classes. From there, the planning team then led to building level planning teams, and they looked at all the logistics necessary for each building, and the building teams made several recommendations back to the district team. What we did during the month of June, we actually physically, myself, Tom Baroni, Bruce Kaufman, a couple people from maintenance, the building principals, we actually walked every building and looked at every space in the district, figured out the capacity for each space, keeping in mind the 36 square foot social distancing, and talked about whether or not we thought we would be able to get buildings to open, with our goal of bringing kids back in person as often as possible. After all that data was collected, the district administrative staff met, and we decided that we did have what we needed to be able to reopen fully, and also offer remote learning for anyone that was not comfortable with sending their children to school in the physical buildings. We also looked at all of the guidance that we received from ODE, the CDC, the Ohio Department of Health, and Mr. Scott has weekly meetings with Dave Covell from Lorain County Public Health, and that information was also used as we put the plan together. I want to thank everyone who's provided feedback and was involved in the review process, from the Board of Education, ALEA, OPSE, our district planning team, our district administrative staff, PTA council, numerous PTA and parent reps. We spent most of last week taking the draft of the plan and having different groups look at it. And each and every time that we met, we made changes afterwards. So those of you that were involved in review meetings, you'll see that today's plan is probably even different than the plan that you saw when you were looking at it as a draft. And I also want to say that this is fluid. This plan is going to change as situations change. This is the best plan with the best information that we have today, July 13th. We're still 6 weeks away from school starting. Situations will change, things can change, and we will continue to make the modifications as we go through based on whatever is going on at the current time. There's 3 sections to the plan. The first section is the considerations for safety, health, and prevention. So these are our guiding principles. We want a safe environment for our students. We want a safe environment for our staff and for our community. All of our decisions are based on those. Again, the plan is flexible, and it's important that parents and staff understand there's no such thing as zero risk for any disease. I have no idea why there's lines showing up on the screen. The more a student or a staff member interacts, the longer, the higher the risk of COVID spread. So if you look at the various levels, there are the lowest risk is students and teachers engaging in virtual only classes. I'm going to pause for a moment. Jim, are you seeing the lines on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have no idea where that's coming from. I'm going to pause out of here and I'm going to get that back right up. So if you look, obviously the more people are around other people, the higher risk there is, and the less people you're around, the lower risk there is. And that's just information from the CDC related to that. I know many of you probably are aware of what COVID is, how it spreads, and what the symptoms are. The key is that the symptoms appear 2 to 14 days after exposure to the virus. So we'll be talking about some of the things that we need to do to protect people and also deal with situations where they may have exposure.
Jack,
Yes.
can you go ahead and you need to make sure the tools aren't active? somebody in the audience is annotating. So the people in the
Gotcha.
audience, please, we're trying to get this done. These kinds of things are very, very disrespectful to everybody else on the call. But I think, Jack, can you go ahead and see if we can shut off annotating?
Absolutely.
It is a shame that we'd have to put up with something like that. A lot of what we're going to discuss to get through this is respecting each other. Of course, that is not the kind of thing that we need to have happen.
Okay, got that taken care of. Turns out it also shows me a name of people annotating. So let me exit this out and I'll get right back into it again. All right, thank you, Mr. Scott. So what are the preventive practices? We need to make sure that our students, our staff are washing their hands for at least 20 seconds, staying home if they're sick. And then one of the things that we need parents to do is to make sure that you check your child every day to make sure they don't have any symptoms. We will not be taking temperatures of all of the students each day. We are counting on the parents as partners with us to be taking check of the symptoms. Okay, this is all straight from Lorain County Public Health. A couple key points here is that they're defining close contacts as someone who spends 10 or more minutes in close proximity within 6 feet of a positive case. Now, what happens is we'll be using seating charts in all of our classes. We'll be using seating charts on the buses. When there's a confirmed case, whether it's a student or a staff member, the Lorain County Public Health will identify who the close contacts are, and it will be their determination, not ours, in terms of who is or is not quarantined. Anyone that tests positive is isolated, monitored daily, and then anyone who's a close contact is quarantined for 14 days. And we'll go through what happens if a student or a staff member is quarantined coming up as we move through the program. If anyone has a temperature, staff or student above 100 degrees, they'll immediately be separated from the other students. We have 2 clinics that will be operating at each school. We have our traditional clinic, and then we have a clean clinic that'll be used for exactly for isolation. One thing that is new is obviously we cannot tell a parent to have their child tested coronavirus, but if they have the symptoms, we would certainly encourage them to. But if the symptoms do not result in coronavirus, they cannot return to school for at least 48 hours without the use of fever-reducing medicine. So for example, if it is Tuesday afternoon and we send a student home because they have a fever, they will not be able to return to school till Friday. And so that is something that's a little bit different this year. That is through Lorain County Public Health. That is not a district, that's a county health department mandate. We have our plan has as much physical distancing as we can through classroom relocations, changes in schedules, staggered start end times, and many other modifications that we'll be going through in the plan. Okay, on facial coverings, we have tied our facial covering requirements to the county codes. As many of you are aware, the governor mandated that all staff are required to wear facial coverings at all times while they're in the buildings. Grades K to 2, it will be recommended. Grades 3 to 12, if it's yellow, it's strongly recommended. If it's orange, it's required in hallways, entering, exit the building. And for example, right now we're in red, so it would be required in all locations if school was in session today, and same with purple. Obviously, there'll be times where there'll be exemptions for students because of medical situations or other extenuating circumstances. But as of today, these are the procedures that we'll be following for facial coverings. Understanding that there'll be times where kids will need a break to either take their mask off, or because they're doing a language activity, or they're doing an activity where they need to, the teacher needs to see their facial expressions, whether it's for music or whether it's for phonics, and same thing that they'll need to be able to see the teachers. But again, this is the general rule for facial coverings. We have some issues with the elementary buildings and with Learwood not being air conditioned. So one of the things that we'll be looking at is the potential for heat days. Mr. Scott will make a decision by 1 p.m. a day prior if we need to have a heat closure. If we do have a heat closure, it's not a day off. It will be a remote learning day where all students and staff will be at home with appropriate assignments and activities. Parents, please plan, especially early in the year, for the potential of heat closings, because we will not, we will not do anything to exacerbate the situation between masks and the heats and the uncomfortableness in some of these buildings. That if a heat closure is needed, Mr. Scott said he will make the decision, and that is something that we need all parents to plan for, especially for elementary and Learwood. The second section are district and building protocols. Everything in this plan is based on us coming back to school. At any time, and I'm going to go through some different scenarios on how this could happen, we could be back to full remote learning. If we go back to full remote learning, it will look a lot different than what it looked like in the spring. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. But it's important that everyone understands that at any time, whether it's from the state or from the county, or if it's because we have staff attendance issues or student attendance issues or other logistical concerns, we could be back to full remote learning for a day, a couple days, a couple weeks. That is a possibility. So please have your backup plan ready for that. This just goes through the explanation of how you'd be notified through school messenger. If we have students who are quarantined because of COVID exposure, they will be assigned to a remote learning schedule for the 14 days they are not permitted to attend school. When I talk about the online and the remote learning program, those students will automatically be assigned to that program for the 14 days they're quarantined. If an entire classroom is quarantined, those students would participate in remote learning with their classroom teacher if the teacher is also quarantined, provided the teacher's not sick. These are our main two learning options that we have at this time. Everyone is by default under option 1, which is the back to campus option, where the kids come each day with all the modifications that we'll be going through in a little bit. Option 2 is online learning. I'm going to talk more about that in the next slide, but online learning registration will begin tomorrow. You'll be receiving information through School Messenger about it, and it concludes, the online learning registration concludes at the end of the month. So what happens with online learning? Well, first of all, the commitment is not for the entire year. It's one semester at a time. So if you're making the decision to sign your child up for online learning, you're making the commitment from the end of August to the middle of January, whenever the semester ends. This is so that we can make sure we have proper staffing and sufficient materials. And this option is open to students in grades K to 12. You'll see a sample online learning schedule in a moment, but it will be a combination of structured, regularly scheduled district teacher lessons daily. There will be daily live interaction with teachers through Zoom, and there'll also be times where kids are working on their own. It will be the exact same curriculum that we're delivering in our buildings. Just due to the uniqueness of a few courses, and I'm thinking mostly at the high school level, there may be a couple situations where a course cannot be offered online, and in that case, we would allow a student to select a different course on their schedule. We will offer SOAR, special ed services, plus classes, and any other special programs that we offer at school. Those will be available online. So children who have any special needs or special considerations, we will have all of those options available. Okay, we are following the National Board of Professional Teaching Standards for our online learning schedule. So during an elementary day, and we're classifying elementary as K-6 and secondary as 7-12. So K-6 students will have basically 3 times where they'll be on during the day. They'll start the day with a live group activity or lesson. They'll have one mid-morning, and then they'll have one in the afternoon. The rest of the day, they'll either be in small groups with a teacher or they'll be working independently on activity, but it will be a balance between being online and being offline, because we also know kids need a break from the screens as well. And there are obviously different programs and activities that students will just need time to practice with. So it will be a combination as example in that example right there. The students in grades 7 through 12, they'll have a schedule which will be determined by the courses the student is enrolled in. So they will have daily live Zoom meetings, and they'll also have independent work time. So on any given day, they'll probably have 3 to 4 classes that they'll have a live Zoom meeting, and the next day they might have the other 3 to 4. And I'll explain that because it also affects how our physical building schedule will look as well. Tomorrow, you'll also see information about Chromebooks. So students in grades K to 8 will be assigned a Chromebook for student use. And then 9 through 12, they can either sign one out or they can bring a device. But this will go for whether they're on campus or remote learning. Signing out a Chromebook is optional. It's not required. If you do sign one out, there's a waiver that a form you'll be filling out explaining what your responsibilities are if you use a district Chromebook at home. And if you are on campus, we're going to be requiring the students to bring their Chromebooks back to school each day, fully charged if they do take them home. If they don't want to sign them out, they don't want to take them home, the Chromebooks will just be left in the classroom and they'll be available for them when they come to school each day. I'll just offer one caution on this. Given the fact that at any time we could end up fully remote, or a student could end up being quarantined and assigned to remote learning, if you don't have internet or technology access at home, I think this is a great opportunity to take advantage of assigning out a Chromebook for the year, if that's something that would be the only way that your child would be able to have access to materials.
Jack, you might want to mention also that, you know, we're working with Lorain County ESC, and we should have some hotspots available at the start of the year. We're not sure of the exact number we're supposed to have, but they're working on that right now. So we should have a number of them if somebody needs that work from home.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Okay, so I'm going to go through the first several slides are about the elementary schools, and all 4 elementary schools will be following the same protocols. Some of these pertain to the elementary schools, to Troy, to Learwood, to the high school, and I'm going to identify those now, so I'm not repeating them on each slide. In every building, we have reviewed spaces to provide maximum physical distancing. So we're not cramming 30 students in a classroom that we could only safely get 15 students in. As a result, you're going to find out that we're using a lot of different spaces in the buildings to provide instructional space. In the instructional spaces, student desks will be arranged to promote physical distancing in classrooms. What that means is they'll be in rows facing the front 6 feet apart, so they're not facing each other. This is at every school. The cafeteria and media centers are being converted into classrooms. At the high school, we're keeping the media center open because it serves some different circumstances there, but will also be a classroom inside the media center as well. We will be moving the libraries to empty classrooms. As we move some classrooms into larger spaces, we will be having some empty classrooms that we'll be using for storage and different things in the buildings. One of them will be a library. We won't be sending entire classes of students to the library at one time, but we will be allowing students to go in small groups to the library to continue to check out books. At the elementary schools and at Troy, art and music will be held in the regular classroom. Students will have PE in the gym, space permitting. That is not 100% sure at every elementary school. And that is something that it will be determined as we make final decisions on space assignments. Throughout the district, the capacity of all the restrooms is 50% of the available stalls and urinals. There'll be no water fountains, but there will be bottle filler stations available at every school. And all of the students, all of the schools will have signage for spaces, hallway markings, and sanitizer stations. The elementary schools, students will not be switching classes. In the areas where they have a different teacher, the teacher will come to their class. And lunch break will be in the classrooms, and that goes the same for Troy and at Learwood. And all of the buildings, we will not be doing any all-school assemblies. The elementary SOAR program, instead of it at being at 2 schools, we'll be having it at each individual elementary school and online. And those parents whose children are in SOAR, you'll be receiving more information from me about that in the middle of August. But we will be having SOAR at the buildings. We will not be sending kids to other buildings for SOAR this year.
Jack, with recess, I think when we start there, I think part of this is we need, because it sounds like the kids aren't going to be able to move around. That's us working with the teachers, knowing that elementary kids need to get up and move. And it's the same piece with the mask. It's common sense. So our normal day is not going to look normal where we keep moving, but we're still going to work with the teachers to make sure the kids get activities and aren't stuck. We will keep them moving around and keep them moving. It's going to be different. I also want to put in that we won't know for sure a lot of these numbers until we get the online numbers back close to the 1st of August. I mean, really, how many people we have doing remote learning is really going to make a big difference on what our campuses look like. And I was talking to one of the elementary principals this morning, that thinking outside the box is, we're so used to going, these are the kindergarten rooms and the 1st grade rooms, the 2nd grade rooms. Well, if a 2nd grade room is small and is supposed to have 18 or 19 kids in it, and a kindergarten room is big and it's only got 14 kids in it, we will be moving those around to make sure that we get social distancing wherever we have to go. So it's obviously going to be a lot different than it was in the past, but we can do it. We can make it happen.
And we will be building in movement activities during the day in the classrooms, as Mr. Scott said. Those will be part of all of the transitions to keep the kids moving, since they won't be able to do as much switching and going in the hallways and all of that. But there are a number of things that we can do in the classrooms while still respecting social distancing. There will be elementary school recess. It will be set up so that the principals will be setting up a schedule so that it's one class in an area, so they're not interacting with other classes, and there'll be some structured activities, as well as some zone playground, free play areas. And there'll be, obviously the kids will have to wash and sanitize their hands before and after recess, but the principals will be working to make sure that recess is limited so that there's not a lot of cross mingling of classes, but that the kids still have recess each day, weather permitting, obviously. To at least start the year for the first semester, and this will again be evaluated based on the situation in January, but we will be offering only half-day kindergarten. We're working on putting together a model similar to our existing half-day kindergarten classes, which will be beneficial for the students in that we're going to be able to keep the class sizes much lower. we want the kids' first experience at school to be a positive one. It's hard for a 5-year-old to be expected for 5.5, 6 hours to maintain all of the social distancing etiquette and to not be able to do a lot of the things that are typically game oriented, maybe in kindergarten. So we'll be focusing on some of the academic and interpersonal skills that we can do in our half-day program. We will work with parents if they have a need for a particular AM or PM class. We will have transportation in accordance with the transportation policies, and we will have the opportunity for kindergarten students to receive a lunch either when they're leaving in the morning or when they arrive in the afternoon. Troy's very similar to the elementary schools. There may be a few times where students switch classes, but generally they will not be switching classes. Generally, the teachers will be switching classes. There are a few students who, because of the courses they take, sometimes don't stay with their same group all day. So those students may be switching. And most of the electives will be held in the regular classroom too, but there'll be times where some of those will not be. Move on to Learwood. So Learwood is going to be a little bit different. Learwood, in addition to all of the larger spaces that we're converting into classrooms, we have been working and hope to have a final agreement with Church of the Open Door to move a team of one of our 3 8th grade teams across the street. We've been over there a couple times now. They have some amazing classroom spaces that are just huge. They're air conditioned. They're fantastic for learning. They have high-speed internet. They have the restrooms. They have cafeteria. I mean, they have everything that we need over at Church of the Open Door. And we are hoping to have a partnership with them where we will send 100 to 110 8th graders over there for their day. And more information about that will be coming to parents in August. If your child is one of those, that team will be participating in that. That's going to free up a lot of space at Learwood. Learwood has a lot of varying size classrooms, and we are trying to minimize how much switching of classes the kids do at Learwood. And so this is one of the things that's allowing us to use some spaces differently. We will have students and teachers switching classes at Learwood. What we're doing is we're taking the largest classroom spaces and we're assigning them each period based on enrollment. That's similar to what we're doing at the high school. It'll have a different looking schedule at Learwood. There'll be a combination of block and single period scheduling, which may be utilized depending on the actual numbers that we have physically attending at Learwood. At the high school, you're going to see a modified schedule, which I'll share on the next slide. And we are matching assignments to enrollment spaces. So teachers may, for example, be in their typical classroom for 4 periods, and they might be in a different classroom for 2 periods based on the enrollment for those sections. The high school is going to operate on a modified schedule, which I'll cover. And then the other thing that we're doing is we're taking all the study halls out of the traditional study hall places, because the study hall rooms are huge and they would make great classrooms. So we are turning them into classrooms, and we're having all study halls and all of the lunch study halls in the competition gym. We'll have the bleachers out. We'll have assigned areas. We can get almost 200 students in each period if we needed to in the competition gym. And that's just using the bleachers without floor space. This is an example high school schedule. Now you see A and B day, that is, students attend every day, but the periods they go to depend on if it's an A day or a B day. The students attend all 5 days. We match the schedule so that the lunch periods meet every day for 45 minutes. The non-lunch periods meet every other day for 90 minutes. That reduces the amount of times kids and teachers are switching classes at the high school. Those of you that have never been in the high school during class time switches, there's a lot of people moving in a short amount of time. We've added some additional minutes. We went from 3 to 5 minutes in between periods, reduced the amount of time they're switching so that we have a little more flexibility to spread this out a little bit better and reduce some of those concerns. This also allows those students taking classes at LCC in the morning to continue to do that without missing any of their courses on campus. It still allows our juniors and seniors who have early leave permission to be able to do that based on this schedule. So that is our schedule at the high school. Our last section is logistical considerations. One of the things we'll be doing is most of the buildings, their schedules will be very similar to what they have been in the past. They've been adjusted just a few minutes to stagger when bus students, walkers, and car riders dismiss. So we're not sending 350, 450 elementary students out the doors all at one time. We're not sending, 600 kids at Learwood and so forth. So we are doing some staggering. And again, this is still subject to change, but after a meeting with Sue Cole and Tom Baroni in transportation, we believe this schedule will work. And this is most likely to be our schedule for next year, which is very similar to this year's schedule. Transportation. Right now, one of the things you'll be getting tomorrow is a transportation survey. We are looking at following the recommendation of 1 student per seat. Unless they are siblings, we can put brothers and sisters in the same seat if they're going to the same school. And right now, we are looking at still busing anyone that's a mile or over away from a school. If it's under a mile, we would be asking them, unless it's a student with an IEP that has one for transportation, we'd be asking them to either be a drop off or to walk or be a bike rider. This is still subject to final determination as they run the reports and they run the logistics. We'll bus as many people as we can. Right now, we're saying that we looked at the 1 mile, and the 1 mile seems to be that sweet spot where we can still get everybody that we need to based on the limitations on how many can be on the seats. Everyone K-12 will be assigned a seat, K-8 assigned a seat on a bus and will be required to wear masks. The only field trips involving school transportation will be athletic competitions. And again, there's a transportation survey that we'll be asking you to complete. Cafeteria, we will be implementing a lot of individually packaged items, but there will be hot items as well. I don't want everyone to think of individually packaged items as being only cold things. They are looking at a lot of different ways that they can still offer a good variety of meals. K-8, again, kids will eat in their classroom, and 9 through 12 in the study hall lunch at the competition gym. And each building will have designated entrances and exits, and you'll learn more about that from building principals with the information they'll be sending out on August 14th. Visitor policy. So a couple of things that we'll be doing for visitors. Visitors will be asking you to please, if you need an appointment with a teacher or school personnel, please pre-arrange it. Obviously, if there's an extenuating circumstance, we'll be glad to work with you to make sure that we can take care of your needs, but we are asking for pre-arranged appointments, and we will not allow any visitors in classrooms while students are present. Visitors will be required to wear facial coverings and will have temperature checks. Right now, the principals are looking at developing open house and back to school events. They will be different than they've been in the past. We are still working out on details, but this will be announced in your August 14th mailing as well. And then any school or PTA events that have gone traditionally in the past, they need to meet physical distancing and other guidelines, and they do require approval by the superintendent so that we can make sure, as we're discussing going forward, what types of things and considerations we need to take place. During the year, the principals will be approving any PTA events or any school-sponsored events. And again, these need to meet the social distancing and safety guidelines. We've told the building principals, and I also told the PTA council as we were going through, to please think about the ramifications of any fundraising that we do. Our students going door to door is not safe and is not something that we would be approving. It's different if they're asking people they know for fundraising. Well, we don't want to see any door-to-door and putting kids at risk with the door-to-door for a fundraising effort. So those will be things that will be looked at in an individual basis. And again, we won't be doing any field trips requiring bus transportation while we have all these guidelines in effect. I know our athletic director, Brent Schremp, is doing a fantastic job keeping up with all the OHSAA requirements, and he will be putting out additional information as it's released. And I believe I read that August 1st is when they're expecting more information. And the same will go for people who want to attend athletic competitions. I believe I heard the governor say the next 30 days will determine what fall sports will look like. So I know we're still waiting on that, and stay tuned. More information is coming. Parents, we will be having, closer to the beginning of the school year, a variety of on-demand training opportunities based on feedback you gave us in the survey. And these are some of the topics. And then I just wanted to let you know the week of July 27th, Mr. Scott and I will be doing several Zoom and YouTube live events. We'll send out dates and times closer to the event, and that will be a chance for you to ask questions or get more information about any of this. So not next week, the week after. We'll also have, I think I've thrown out August 14th a few times, but every principal in the district will be sending out a school messenger message with building specific plans to all of the parents and students in their buildings August 14th. And you'll see tomorrow if you sign up for online, the online program, that is the date we're looking at as well to send out specific information in terms of who the child's teacher will be and so forth for the online program. That concludes the plan. I'm going to stop my screen share, and if any of the board members have any questions or anything, please feel free.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. And those of us who've kind of seen the drafted plan have, we probably have still questions. And I want to give the opportunity for the board members to ask a few questions. But on your last slide, you had mentioned if people have questions, are you then suggesting that they email you or Mr. Scott, or what is the most efficient way after we kind of get through our Q&A questions here?
Sure, they could email myself, Mr. Scott, Tom Baroni, depending on the topic. They also could, if they have questions that they want to wait until the July 27th, the open YouTube Live or Zoom.
Okay.
Those type of things.
No, I think, Jim, also we have to put the principals into that mix because each building is going to look a little different. So, that's, again, as we get closer to school, the principals need to be in that mix as far as answering questions go.
Okay. Dr. DB, maybe taking a step back, you started your presentation about the process, and obviously this has been in April, and at the time we really had no idea what we were searching at. We landed with the two options we did. I think as people in the community look at what other communities are doing, could you speak a little bit to why we ended up at the all day, everyday option versus some sort of hybrid plan? I think people would like to kind of understand that.
Sure. So the main goal that we had all along is we wanted to get our kids in front of our teachers as often as we could. And the telltale was when we did the actual walking at every building and measuring every space and looking at that, we felt we could put a plan together that would allow us to bring the kids back every day, knowing that there would also be some parents who would, no matter whether it was an A, B or not, would prefer not to send their children back. So we wanted to be able to accommodate both groups. We saw in the survey results and a lot of the emails that we've received, parents are concerned about getting their kids to school every day. They're also concerned about if we didn't have school every day, how, who would take care of their kids if they were at work. But we felt like we had the ability, and we're fortunate that we have neighborhood elementary schools because that was a big plus in being able to do this successfully.
Jim, and I think if you see other districts, it's really 7th grade or middle school into high school that you're seeing some kind of modified schedule. And most of those places, it's a space issue, or it's that belief they can't distance or they have less exposure if they have fewer kids on campus at a time. we really felt like as we looked at our campuses that we could really mitigate those effects and still have kids, on campus every day. And we feel like, especially academically, that's the best situation for the kids.
Can you talk a little bit for the high school parents? You mentioned the schedule process. Yeah. So now that we're modifying the schedule, how are we going to identify or be able to understand what kind of conflicts might arise with the schedule we have? I know we normally have conflict schedules anyway, the way classes are scheduled. So how will that kind of play out a little bit?
So we actually didn't, in this plan, we were fortunate enough that we did not have to modify the master schedule. We just simply modified the times that the periods met.
Okay.
But I've already reached out, the counselors and I have a meeting set up. Well, we don't have the date and time set up, but we are meeting the week of July 27th to look at kids who have schedule conflicts or what some of the potential issues will be. And then I'll be involving the high school counselors when we get a list of the high school students that are online to look at how that would affect additional scheduling. So for example, if we have 6 sections of Algebra 1, but we have enough kids for a full online section of Algebra 1 at the high school, then we might only need 5 physical sections at the high school. So we would be altering some student schedules to different periods.
Jack and Bob, will we have an opportunity to show the public through visual examples of what their buildings will look like inside, meaning the classroom that you described and that you have, so well described over the last couple of months, how it's evolved and changed? Will we have pictures that we can show folks, fairly soon that, this is what a physically spaced classroom will look like in our elementary building, in our Troy building, in our Learwood building, in our high school buildings? And if so, how soon could we do that?
I think that's something that we could do. And I think that would probably be something that we would be able to put together for the last week of July, that when we have those YouTube sessions and the Zoom sessions, that we could show some of those mock-ups.
And do we have plans for our teachers at their desks or our building secretaries at their desks? Will there be any, plexiglass like we see in stores when you go to order and different things like that, a separation between the teacher who's, exposed to, several folks throughout the day, or the secretary?
And Ron, that's not only secretaries, but teachers. If you come in the central office, and most people have it sometime, you come in a door and there's a half of a U-shaped counter that you walk around into the main building. We've got plexiglass where every secretary or administrative assistant sits. And that's part of that discussion that we have with David Covell, that barrier, 6-foot distancing, plus a mask, and maybe even potentially a face shield. We've got lots of barriers really for safety for everybody in there. The reason why I wanted to talk, Jack, is I was actually down at EYS today, which was our first day of our extended year program for kids. And it went tremendously. We are so appreciative of our parents who were so cooperative. Every child that came in the building today, every special ed child that came in the building except for 2, and those were because of particular reasons, had a mask on today for our extended year program. Again, masks on the teachers. We had plexiglass barriers that the teachers were mobile and could put between themselves and the kids when they worked with them. They had shields if they needed them. So if their face mask needed to come down, the child could see their face and expressions, which is very, very important in some of our services. So Ron, you're exactly right. And Tom Maroney has done a really good job of getting those things very quickly. As a matter of fact, we just bought face shields today for all the teachers in the school district, and it was a local company we bought them from. So, we were really appreciative that they came to us and made them available to us.
Jack, you mentioned earlier that the online and the in-person curriculums are going to be the same. And also, if someone has to go into quarantine, that's not like a 14-day vacation, they switch from an online or from an in-person to an online learning. So can you speak to how, from a timing standpoint, the 2 curriculums are going to march in step? So if one student is switched from an in-person, all of a sudden thrown into an online, environment that they're picking up right where they left off and they're not, behind or ahead of where the online course is.
Sure. So Heather Hamker and Aaron Cheney, our instructional coaches, are going to be working on that piece. Now, there may be a situation where it's a day ahead or a day behind because obviously, things happen in different buildings or different classrooms. There's a sub or something to that effect, but it won't be, we will be working on the pacing to make sure that generally speaking, everyone is on the same unit at the same time.
And, Mike, and this is something that I'm working on right now, and we're looking for the right individual. Part of this is we really feel like we're going to have somebody who is a director of online. That was one of our lessons learned during March, April, and May. It is such a big piece, and there's so many moving parts to it. Our principals do a great job, but we've got 7 different buildings. So we're going to have somebody that really is going to help with that remote learning. So the things that you're talking about, keeping our curriculum consistent, putting out fires, taking care of individual needs of kids, we can really focus on that. And we don't have people that are also focusing on the in-school part, trying to do 2 jobs at once, both of which are going to be amazingly difficult this year.
And Jack, I have one more question. When you and Tom or whoever was doing the physical planning and walking the buildings, did you look for like a worst case scenario, say, and I don't think this is going to happen, but say all the parents said, we're all going in person, no one's going to pick online. Are you going to be like, oh, shoot, we don't have the space for that many. We were counting on a bunch of people choosing online. Or how do you have that space for that worst case scenario?
Yeah, well, obviously it would be a best case scenario if everyone was, able to do it, but we based it on knowing that, as I told people, we had to base our capacity on all of our kids coming back. So, and it's more, in some buildings it was more challenging than others. And that's why I hedged a little bit when I said the gym. Eastview is a large elementary school. That's one school where we may need to use the gym. The other elementary schools, I don't think so. But again, the kindergarten piece also helps us because of we're going to be keeping our kindergarten classes small, so they won't need as large of a space with a smaller enrollment.
And, I was on a Zoom call with about 60 superintendents from around the state, everywhere from Cincinnati to, Steubenville, Toledo, Youngstown, and the schools that have already started their surveys this week, they're online. People who are signing up for online. The districts across the state are going from 5% to 25%. So really the next 2 weeks are going to be very, very big for us. That's a big part of what we need to do is find out how many people are going to be there in person so that we can really make those plans.
Jack and Bob, how will we, or are we, or will we be very soon preparing our teachers for both the in-classroom instruction and then if we have to go to online at some point, or the teachers who are electing to do online, do we have a training program set up? Obviously, the online thing is an obvious example that we should prepare them for training to be teaching online, but the classroom is going to be different too. So do we have a plan to talk to our teachers about, this is the way that we think it should be done, that are best practices, that, to help them through some certain uncertainties?
Sure. We have a great relationship with ALEA, and they were kind enough to work with us to allow their summer PD to be during August this year. And so we have a variety of topics that the staff will be able to choose from, but we're also doing a 30-minute on demand that every teacher in Avon Lake will watch. That will be all of the Avon Lake Way is what I believe we're calling it. And it will basically be all of the expectations and guidelines of how we'll set things up and how we'll handle things. And I've also been working with Mr. Scott and talking about some ideas for allowing some additional preparation for teachers before the year starts that we're taking a look at.
I think that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Well, and Ron, I think this is a good point to bring this up. probably in the next couple of days, Jack and I are going to come to the board and ask for permission to do a public hearing for potentially moving the start of school back a couple of days. The reason for that is we still have to do, you have to do a 30-day public hearing before you can even discuss it and vote on it at a regular board meeting. This meeting is already less than 30 days before the August board meeting. So, you know, we're going to have to do some work and probably have a special board meeting to look at that. We're not positive, but with Jack and our preparation for what we need to do to get our teachers ready to do the best job we can for the kids the very next day, there's a potential that we might need to move the start of school back a couple days.
Do the teachers know of the plan to help them with some training yet? Have we told them?
They've seen all of the topics that we'll be offering in August, yes.
Mr. Scott, just following up on the schedule, I know one of the questions I've gotten is, well, why don't we just move the start of the school year back 3 or 4 weeks to eliminate the hot days potential issue? And maybe you could just speak to why that's not viable as an option.
You know, I think the biggest issue with that is the high school and you know, their schedule and their need and kids coming back in all aspects really August 1st. And if we're pushing it all the way back until into September, it really becomes difficult for them. And then of course you're pushing it out on the other end till you're going well into June. You still have to make those days up. So now you're not talking graduation until the 2nd or 3rd week of June. The other part of it is, especially if you're doing it for hot days, you know, last year our 4 hottest days of the year were in the 2nd week of September. So we would have, you know, we didn't have it even close hot days in August last year. You really can't control the weather, which is hard. You know, another piece, and this was talking with David Covell, because we've had a number of discussions about pushing it back just, you know, to get through, especially some of the things that go on, you know, as far as celebrations and fairs and those kinds of things in case there's flare-ups. You know, and his discussion is nothing is that accurate. There's nothing that shows that if you're out for these days or you're later or sooner, or you're out for a particular time to take a break, you don't know if the virus is active or not. So you really would be shooting, you know, you might be too early, you might be too late, or you might not need it at all. So, you know, it has been discussed going later into September, but, you know, that's sort of a roll of the dice. And my feeling is the negatives are much more than the positives for that.
When you mentioned, I'm
There's
sorry,
one.
when you mentioned this public hearing to shift the by a few days, there's enough play, so to speak, in the schedule that we won't have to push it out on the back end. We can still at the same time, correct?
You know, we do have enough hours, and actually, you know, we also, one of the board policies that is being changed today has a lot to do with those hours and what counts towards school and what doesn't count towards school. We actually didn't have that policy, and it's the reason why we're having to adjust it a little bit. Is it was originally what was called a blizzard bag, so that if you were getting real close to the maximum number of days before you had to start making school days up, you could actually give kids bags with assignments in it and say, oh, that counts as a day of school. Online learning is a little different, but that same now hourly concept for a school year is still there. So we can move it a couple days and still be within the hourly limit for a school year.
Bob and Jack, if I could ask a question about probably, I think, 3 areas that would potentially be difficult, you know, music, band, and PE. What specifically are our plans for those actual environments because of the natural, first of all, popularity of our music and band programs, and then just the obviously singing outwardly, playing an instrument outwardly, or moving around in a physical space.
And Jack, I'll start with that. You can maybe take PE when we get to it. In the meeting last Friday with David Covell, you know, they were discussing those very items, and we're actually going to have Lorain County guidance that's going to come out probably either Friday or Saturday this week. It goes with Lorraine County Health Department and the superintendents really looking at practical ways that we can have school. And what they're seeing is when they talk about blowing into an instrument, of course, orchestra, just distancing. Blowing into an instrument, they're feeling that if you're blowing into an instrument and you're distanced in a room, that most of it is going into the instrument itself. So he feels like he's going to okay band, you know, if distancing and other things are done correctly, sanitizing and all those pieces. Like you said, choir is the issue. And as of last Friday, he didn't think he could recommend a regular kind of choir program. Given that, we're meeting next week with Emilio Harufe and Mrs. Pops. They really feel like they have some stuff they can do in the middle school and high school that's going to be very, very good for the kids and is going to take care of that piece as they move forward. And it won't look like, you know, a regular choir where everybody's shoulder to shoulder and there's 100 kids belting it out. But they feel like they can do some things that'll work and not normally stuff and not the big choir stuff, but they can move it forward so the kids are going to get better musically for when we do have that opportunity, whether it's in the winter or in the spring, to come back together as big choirs.
How are you going to get the physical distancing for athletic trips by buses?
The buses will have to still follow whatever the guidance is for the buses at the time. Will have to be followed by athletics as well. So right now that's one student, one athlete per seat.
Okay, thank you.
And to jump,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Ron, I wanted to answer your PE part of your question. So
Yes.
we'll be able to have PE, but the activities that they'll do in PE will have to look different.
And then if I could just jump on Dale's question, will that be the same for like choir trips? Like if they're going, or band trips, will that be the same as the athletic busing situation?
Any busing.
Any busing? Thank you.
Yep.
I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about the mask requirement and specifically why it's not mandatory even at that level 2. For all kids.
Okay. Mr. Scott, do you want
I'll
that
take
one or you
that
want me to
one.
handle it? Okay.
You know, and you know, part of it, Pam, is what we're looking at is common sense kind of activities. And between now and the start of school, the mask piece, that could be a part that's modified. You know, in that meeting that I was in today, it was almost split 50-50. People that in that orange range were highly recommended masks. And then the group that it was mandatory all the time, anytime that kids were coming into schools. And everybody had good reasons. And a lot of it had to do with the kinds of schools they had, number of kids, kinds of classes, availability. For me, I think the reason why we're there is we really want the opportunity to teach the kids that this is how you need to act if you want to be able to have school all the way through. If you saw the Lieutenant Governor's clip on athletics the other day, and it's entitled "If You Want to Have a Season," you know, the kids are going to have to do this. You know, and I understand the mask stuff and the controversies and people that don't want masks and you know, masks everywhere all the time. The reality is, and just like Jack said earlier, anytime, even if the masks are mandatory, and I had to do this the other day, I had to sit in Cleveland Clinic while my wife was having a procedure, and I had that mask on from 6:15 in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's tough. You know, there's a practicality to it that we've got to be able to work with the kids to respect each other, and that they've got to be in this together so we can keep having school. So the idea on this is we want to highly recommend it, but we also want to model it. We also want the kids to know that, you know, it's social distancing. I need to be able to keep my distance from these other kids, that it's about barriers. You know, a mask is a barrier, a face shield's a barrier, distancing is a barrier, sanitizing, washing your hands, using all that stuff. The more barriers you have, the less likely we are to have kids get sick and flare-ups, and in the end have to go back to all online learning. So, I mean, that was really the thinking. But I think it's one of those big parts, like Jack said earlier, this is a fluid piece. And it honestly could be different 2 weeks from now. I mean, we'll work with Lorain County Health Department, and the state health department. And there's lots of rumors, of course, but we're going to do what we need to do in the end to make sure that our kids and teachers are safe all the time.
So Bob or Jack, when there's an exception on the mask topic that you'd mentioned for like medical exceptions to the mask wearing, what will the schools require? The doctor's note that doesn't really have to specifically name the diagnosis for privacy reasons, but the doctor still has to sign off on this person has a condition that would prevent the mask, and we're not just relying on a parent saying, oh, my kid has a medical condition.
For students, we're not requiring doctor's verification. We're just assuming that the parents are going to give us the correct information on that.
Mike, and that is actually part of the recommendation from David Covell. And I've already seen a text that came through about taking temperatures and asking the appropriate questions before kids come to school. The recommendation is we need parents to step up and really be respectful of each other and check your child's temperature every morning. And if they have a temperature, stay home. But when you're talking with David Covell, he says that, Bob, remember that 40 to 45% of the people that have COVID don't have a temperature. So you need to ask the other question. You need to ask the respiratory question. Have you really been around anybody? And we need the parents to, when in doubt, keep your kids at home and keep the rest of the kids safe. We're going to work on attendance stuff and those kinds of things because, again, our biggest goal is to keep school going and not have to go back to completely remote for everybody all the time.
I have a question. With online learning, will there be attendance taken? Okay, that's a quick answer. Thank you.
Jack and Bob, could you maybe, for the benefit of all, specific to the classroom switches at the high school and Learwood, how will that? I mean, I know you talked a little bit about it, trying to make classes longer so you have less switches, but how will it look? How will it play out in the hallways?
And Jack, you can go with it, but a lot of it, and Ron, this is one of those ones that we know most likely when we start school, we're going to have to make some shifts. And like you said, if you've been in the hallway when we've changed classes, we know where there's bottlenecks. We know that down by the media center, going up to the science rooms, when that bell rings, that's a bottleneck. Part of what Jack and the high school staff are going to work on is not only how our classes are set up, fewer times that we're moving, but also having classes, places, and going other places when they do move, so we don't necessarily have those same bottlenecks. And again, I'm going to go back to, we'll have a lot of directional pieces. We're going to have to look at the kids and keep reminding them, and the adults reminding them that, keep your social distance, get your mask on, make sure you do those things that are going to keep yourself safe and the other kids safe. So, Jack.
Yeah, I think part of the thing with adding additional minutes between the classes and with the signage and giving us a little bit more flexibility with how we're grouping some of the larger classrooms and activities, we'll be able to work with the high school in terms of coming up with a way where they're not just sending everybody out all at once.
And, speaking of training for like instructional stuff that you guys, talked about earlier, just now a thought in my head, will we do any type of coaching in our classrooms in that first week with our students, reinforcing this is how we're doing the classroom switches, this is how we're entering the building, this is how we're exiting the building? Just, very much like we did in March when we were sending kids home for online learning for the rest of the school year. You guys did a nice job of spending that last week, not really teaching classes, but talking to the students about how this online stuff's going to work and how it's going to evolve as it, on a daily basis. will we train them up, coach them up in that first week of school at all levels, from kindergarten through high school?
And Jack, I'll go first and you can jump in. Without a doubt, I want to also put a piece in that we're also going to be doing a lot of social emotional checks during that time. You know, we know that there's going to be a lot of tension coming in and some angst just because it's new and it's different. So Jack, I'll let you go, but there's a whole piece that we're going to be needing to do with kids, you know, whether it's kindergartners all the way up to seniors at the start of school, that is different than it has been in the past, because it's going to be a different scenario than they've ever been in before.
Sure, and I'll take that a step further. Two pieces to that. Number one, our Kristen Acton and Amanda Kebler have been leading a social emotional staff development training that they're going to be doing some pieces, but most importantly, they're also going to be leading the charge with helping teachers get resources for working with students. But beyond it just being the teachers, we need the parents to really step up and to, regardless of what their personal opinion or personal belief is this is whatever the policy is at the time at the school, we need their support to teach their children how to wear these correctly, how to be respectful of the policy, whether or not they agree with it, and also to help their younger kids practice what it's like to put on a mask, wear a mask for 15, 20 minutes before you have the chance to take it off. I mean, we need everyone's help with this. This is, I never thought I'd be in a day where schools were political about whether or not you're opening schools. We're trying to do the best we can, educating everyone. We need everyone to help out with that.
Jack,
Well, I think, Jack, that piece of it, to go just a little bit further even, is, you know, that piece of whether we're in school or not in school. And we've had a lot of questions about, you know, what's going to happen if a teacher tests positive for COVID-19. You know, and last Friday, David Covell said that, you know, if you've got your 6 foot distancing, the teacher has their mask on, even if they have a face shield on and they test positive, most likely nobody else in the class is going to have to be quarantined, just that teacher. And it's Lorain County Health Department that will be making those decisions. And it's the same thing that if we get an active virus, a spike in the school, you know, they will be the ones that are coming in and saying, you know what, we need to shut this down, or we need to stop this right now, so we're going to move away. I mean, that's why Jack and I are being so adamant that we need to be able to do everything we can to make sure we don't have that flare up. You know, we know that kids are going to get sick and adults are going to get sick because that's nature. You know, that's what's going to happen. But we really need to mitigate everything we can do to make sure people are as safe as possible. And, you know, we are going to have things like seating charts, because they're going to want to track if they do have a positive test. You know, who was that child sitting next to? What class was that teacher in? And they're going to come in and look and say, are you doing the things you need to be doing? You know, are you social distancing? Are you wearing masks? Do you have face shields on? Are you sanitizing? And that'll make a difference on if people get quarantined and you know, if or when they get quarantined. But that's going to be a Lorain County Health Department decision. And we're going to be basically helping them by getting them good data on how our schools are set up safety-wise.
Mr. Scott, just as a follow-up on the attendance piece, I've been trying to keep up with all the questions people have been messaging me, and I've had several on attendance. I do want to tell you that this year, this was a plan well before COVID came into existence, but since the state now calculates attendance in hours and not days, all of our attendance will be through hours. So the Power School, the report cards, everything will show up in terms of hours. There is not going to be any penalty for kids or staff who are staying home when they are sick. We are encouraging it. I've already told the teachers that, look, in the past, we've had people that have come to school when they're sick. We can't have that anymore. If people are sick this year, they need to stay home. We will not be doing any attendance awards, attendance incentives at any of the schools. We don't ever want a parent to have to send their child to school because their child's insisting on it for a piece of paper. Likewise, we don't want a staff member to feel like they need to come in when they have a 100-degree fever because they're worried about who's going to cover their class, or they're worried about giving a test or X, Y, or Z. This year, we need people to take care of their health, and we need them, if someone is sick, to stay home. And parents, we really need you to please help us every day. Check your child's temperature and symptoms if you can. And if they're not feeling well, it's okay for them to stay home.
And I think, Jack, there have been a number of questions about, are we going to be able to have substitutes? And we're working on those issues right now. Again, it will depend again on what our numbers are when we come back in person. We work with Rachel Wixie, but we've got a couple other things in the pipeline, on how we can cover classes and make sure social distancing happens, which could even possibly include having, our own subs that we can move around the district every day. But again, that plan is being made right now, and it'll be more solid once we know exactly how many kids we have online and how many kids we have in person.
So Jack, I may be wrong, but in the past, if you were homesick, almost for whatever reason, you needed a doctor's note or it was an unexcused absence. This year, there's no such thing as an unexcused absence, right? Just stay home if you're sick.
If they are sick, a parent phone call counts as an excused absence. And that's state policy.
Jack, Mike, are you done with that one? I didn't want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Jack, could you go back to the social emotional training for just a second? You mentioned it. Is that available to teachers too, with Kristen?
So what, and let me see if I can pull it up really quick. I just had it here.
Autumn, would you talk about impact also after Jack's done with what Kristen's doing?
Sure.
Yep. We're offering,
Jack, don't forget Lisa Goodwin also.
right now, we're offering supporting students' social emotional needs for school reentry, recognizing and responding to social emotional needs in a virtual setting. Dr. Megan Barlow, who's also a parent at Erie View, will be doing a session. Let me see if I can pull up the others, but we have several sessions that we actually have more than the teachers even have the list in front of them. When they get their new list at the end of July, there's about 7 different sessions now that we have. And I'll let Autumn talk about her part.
So Ron, we do offer as a district completely free of charge to all of our employees, an employee assistance program that we've had for a very long time through Impact. So I know even the board has seen me send out different emails staff-wide of that reminder. Opening day every year, we always bring Impact to opening day to speak briefly about the program, the fact that it's confidential. And there's lots of services that they offer on a social, emotional level, as well as a variety of other things. It's not just social, emotional, but it is something that our unions as well help us communicate out to their membership, which is wonderful and appreciated, because we never want any of our employees not to feel as if there's a resource available to them. And sometimes that outside resource, maybe someone who's not here in the district, is going to be the best opportunity for our staff members. So the district does invest in an employee assistance program as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Ron, the other three,
go ahead, Jack.
the other 3 are maintaining a work-life balance, mindfulness that LACAT is putting on, and stress management that Ohio Guidestone is putting on.
A quick question about the bus drivers. What are we doing to keep them safe, on a daily basis this year that's different than, than the typical?
Jack, can you unmute Tom to talk about that? He just had another meeting with Sue Cole, I know.
Absolutely. Go.
Hey, everybody.
There he is.
Thanks, Jack. Hey, Jack, while you're at it, Sue Cole's also on as well. She would be an excellent person to speak with what we're doing with the bus drivers. But real quickly, a lot of what we're doing on the bus, at least the nuts and bolts of what will happen, will be similar every day. Obviously, seating charts for students is something that normally takes place for us, so we can track kids and interactions. We are installing hand sanitizers on our buses. So as each student enters the bus, they will have some hand sanitizer on it. Our bus drivers will have the
Tom, what kind of
opportunities.
hand sanitized machines are those?
It's the non-touch ones. You kind of stick your hand underneath it and it reads that your hand's there and it squirts it in your hand, and it doesn't leave like a big long standing gel on it. So kids don't have to worry about like having their hands slip on railings while they're boarding the bus or any of those type of stuff. So it has that the alcohol content that's required. So it doesn't stay in your hand for a terribly long period of time, but is effective in kind of keeping your hands clean as much as possible if you can't actually use soap and water for 20 seconds or more. Our bus drivers, of course, have a huge responsibility in and around our community every day, but having masks, shields, things of those natures, gloves, those are all the things that I know that in working with Sue Cole and working with our bus drivers to give them that feeling of security and that their position is truly important. So I don't know, Sue, if you're piped in or not, but if you wanted to add what kind of you've heard recently.
Sue, could you turn your video on, please?
So you can find her.
I've got several Sues in here. I sent a message,
Okay.
but I guess I have the wrong one.
But anyway, I mean, that,
As Tom, as he's getting Sue up, could you talk a little bit about bus routes?
yeah, bus routes, and it's been, oh, there she is. Bus routes has been mentioned a little bit. The survey that Jack will be launching that talks about transportation will definitely help us in a lot of ways. So in working with Mr. Scott, obviously closely with Sue in regards to the mile or less, I guess, boundary of having those people not be bused does help a good chunk for us. So in working with Sue, we're thinking that with that 1 mile or less, that will alleviate 685 students roughly from busing. With that being said, a lot of those students are elementary age students because of the neighborhood school district pieces there. So we know that that will be helpful with it. Sue, I think the goal is based on working with Sue and Jack and the schedule that was shared earlier today, the opportunity for us to keep routes as similar as they have been and be effective with the social distancing piece on the buses, I think is key. I think that the schedule that we've modified allows for that. And I think that's where this might be a good opportunity for Sue to kind of talk specifically about how she sees that working.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, basically, we'll know more once we get those surveys back and we know exactly how many students we're looking at. Because usually in past years, everybody gets a bus stop. But this year, I mean, they're going to have to request a bus stop because I can't be putting everybody on and not knowing for sure if they're riding or not.
And another piece that we've talked about, I mean, you heard Jack talk about the half-day kindergarten. Without having that full-day piece, the middle of the day runs will obviously increase. There's other pieces with busing to schools that were required to bus to outside city limits. Let's use like St. Raphael's. That's a big bus trip for us. Last year, at the beginning of last year, we used to take 4 buses at least to St. Raphael's and other schools outside our boundary on those same trips. With that same situation, we're looking at 8 buses it would take to do that. So Sue is currently working with the leadership of those school districts to kind of see if they can help us with very similar what our survey is going to provide us is that busing piece. So a lot of that is riding on it. In talking with Sue, I think we both agree that we find that we will probably get a pretty good chunk of assistance from our parents taking kids to school. We just really make sure that we need to know that because we even talked about the JVS and the number of kids. We had a pretty good full bus last year going out to Oberlin. Well, if we have that same amount of students or more, you're talking about multiple buses and then the impact that could have on our day-to-day transportation.
Yeah, and one of the concerns, I know you guys made the comment about, if you're an employee and you're sick, you have to stay home. Well, that's going to be tough in my department as well, because not anybody can jump in a bus seat and drive. So,
hey, Sue, real quick, after that, the first question was about the care and safety of our bus drivers. I answered it with some of the things that we spoke about. Was there anything to add to that, or is that pretty much where we're at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't see where the shield behind the driver will help, because the students have to walk past the driver every, as they're getting on anyways. But if the drivers have a choice between the mask and the shield or both, I think that'll help protect them. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Of course, also the cleaning of the buses too. We're gonna have to really do some training about that with the drivers as well.
Sue, from a physical standpoint of the bus, is there an ability to put that plexiglass from like so it covers that side that the students walk up the steps and go past the bus driver, and not from just behind?
No, the state of Ohio, the Department of the Ohio Safety Patrol, they're the ones that decide what the standards can be, and they can only put it behind the driver. And if we put that behind the driver, we have to take that seat out. And then we have to cover all the metal around the seat with foam so that, we're following the right procedures.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I got a couple more if that's okay.
Sure.
Jack, back to the plan at the high school with, I know that it's not AB, but the list of the AB, a couple of specific classes. Are periods 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9 daily classes?
Yeah, yes, they're the lunch period. So we made sure every student and staff had their lunch period each day.
Okay. All right. That answers that question. And then one last one for me, and I apologize, I have so many questions, but and I've asked you guys this before several times, and just for the benefit of our very large audience tonight, I think it's important to ask it publicly. Jack and Bob, what happens if the world changes, the state changes, the country changes in the first week of our school, a week before we start school at any point, and says we're shutting everything down? Are we prepared as a school district to go completely online, at the drop of a hat?
We will be once school starts. Yes, that's one of the reasons that we're looking at the request for some additional time before school starts.
And Ron, that even includes technology. We did get some federal dollars, and we're buying Chromebooks with those, which have already been ordered, actually. Jack, I can't remember how many Chromebooks did we order?
I believe close. I know we ordered 200 from the one grant, and then I know there was another cycle that was going to be going in the spring, but we moved that up to the fall, and I believe there's 250 in that one. So I think it's close to 500.
So Ron, with what we learned in the spring and what the teachers are doing right now, and then pieces of technology, again, we've got a lot to do between now and August 25th, or when we start school. But if we have to go all online, it will be extremely different than it was in the spring, and much more student-centered and much more direct teach by the teachers with the students.
Is there a uniformity to that now that we'll have months to think about it, where all the teachers know that this is the way we do it in the Avon Lake City School District, or this is the way we do it at the elementary level, different than the way we do it at Troy? Is there a uniformity to that?
That's one of the things that we are working on that we'll be rolling out.
Okay.
So Ron, maybe to give a more specific answer, because I know this was one of the issues that came up last time. There would be, if we ended up going full remote, there would be an expectation of daily live instruction for kids for some period of time.
And why he hesitated, Ron, is that it's going to be different between a first grader and a kid in physics. So,
right.
But what
exactly.
Jack said is exactly right.
Yeah.
There's going to be an expectation of daily teaching of each class.
And then we'll obviously let everybody know that for sure.
So I have two more questions. One, Jack, you mentioned every building is going to have two clinics, a clean clinic and the normal clinic, if you will.
Right.
Who will be staffed in the clinics? Do we have full-time nurses at every school, or how is the clinic staffed within the buildings?
I'm gonna let Tom jump in on that because I know he's been meeting with Becky and they've been working on different pieces for that. But we will have backups. We will have a procedure in each building for how that's handled. But Tom, do you want to give a little more?
Sure. Yeah, and it's an excellent question, especially I had a Zoom meeting with our nursing staff yesterday morning, and they brought forth a lot of very good questions and ideas on how we're going to get back to school and what that looks like. So with the sick and well clinics is kind of what we're kind of terming that as. Our goal is that our nurses are all registered nurses. They're contracted for 5 3/4 hours, but we all agree that we know that each nurse who's split between 2 buildings in this situation, we're asking way too much of them to think that they're going to be able to accomplish anything and everything that comes their way, even making a decision to send a student back to class if that's the case. So what we've worked on, and I have to give Becky Bush a ton of credit. She reached out today and we had another conversation about securing some additional staffing to allow those clinics to be staffed almost from bell to bell in each one of our buildings. I can't report right now that we're going to have bell to bell in each building, but after today's conversation and approval of some of the staffing tonight on tonight's agenda, we definitely got a lot closer to that. So we have had some subs that have been very, I guess, beneficial to the district, who have committed to put in some more time to expand the hours of our current nurses. We are fortunate enough to have a nurse who was relocated 3 years ago, who's made her way back into Avon Lake, and we're fortunate enough to secure her as well for some additional time. So Becky and I will continue to work on what that schedule will look like. But the good news is, especially for our secretaries, and maybe even more specific, our elementary secretaries, because they're the only ones in the building, is to try to relieve them of some of the pieces and parts that they normally would step in if the nurse was at their other campus. So as far as the staffing piece, fortunately for us, it's registered nurses and subs that are familiar with our districts, and trying to expand that coverage from bell to bell on each campus.
All right, thanks. And the second question, unrelated, under the topic of encouraging, keep your kids at home if they're sick, or even in the slightest. In normal years, if your child was at home, you could send in a request. Hey, send their homework or the assignments that they missed home with so and so. Would the approach this year be, or is there a mechanism that, yes, they're too sick to be on the cautious side, we're going to keep them home, but they can still do their work? So can they drop into an online session like that day and just sort of ad hoc take that, for the day or two that they're homesick?
Good question, Jack.
So Mike, I would say for one day, we wouldn't necessarily do that because we would need to let the online teachers know. But we do have single sign-on this year, which is coming out. And actually parents and students can access almost all of their instructional materials. They'll be able to access them online with one sign-on. So for example, at the elementary level, our reading program, our math program, have everything is available. Almost everything was available online. And, for our core classes throughout the district, many of them have things that have the online component. So they would be able to do that. They'd also be able to get things emailed if the parent would just rather have anything emailed to them. They could have, those type of things, but it probably wouldn't be the teachers probably won't even have the ability with some of the things going on to stop, make copies, send things to the office, doing some of that. But we would make sure that if it was only for a day, we'd give them access to what they need. And then if it was for a longer period of time, yes, then we would have the option of putting them in an online.
Mike, that has been an ongoing discussion, as our online component gets richer, and even during the school year as it gets richer and we get better at it. We're hoping some of those things work themselves out so that we can transition to it fairly quickly, especially for kids that might be out. Like Jack said, one day is hard because you don't know exactly where kids are in the class and how to connect necessarily. But if they're going to be out for any extended time, how can we take care of that?
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Jack and Bob, how will we communicate a positive case? How will we handle that and keep, everything at an even level, so to speak?
And Jack, let me take care of that one, then
Okay.
you can add on to it. Jack mentioned it earlier that, we as a school district can't require that somebody gets tested for COVID. The same thing is, we're not necessarily, unless the Department of Health comes and lets us know, which we're assuming they are, and that's the problem. We're not sure how that process is going to work. We know they're going to come to us if it's a student and they want to see exactly where the child was and be able to track and see exposure to other kids. How we can put that out to the community, people in the class or people in the school, we're working on that right now with the Department of Health. Because there are some privacy pieces that go along with that, HIPAA rules that go along with that. So right now there's no clear answer to it, but it obviously is something that is huge on everybody's mind because we know it's going to happen, and we know parents are going to want to know, was that young man or young woman sitting next to my child? Do I need to worry that they've been exposed? But we're working on that process, and we're working on it very closely with Lorain County Department of Health.
Thank you.
Jack, you got anything to add to that?
No, I think that sums it up pretty well. Thanks, Bob.
Any other questions? Maybe I'll just kind of tie everything together here with a couple of closing comments before we move on to the business part of our agenda. And I appreciate the over 200 people who have sit and listened to this question and answer session along with the presentation that Jack put together. I mean, as you can see, there's 5 of us who are fairly in the know with the procedures that are being laid out, and we still had questions that lasted well over an hour. So we know that those of you watching are probably thinking about other things that are crossing your mind that are serious concerns that we need to address. And I guess would preach patience and use the forums that we laid out earlier through both the building principals and through our administrators here, to help us work through those questions and get answers to those. I guess the thing that I would ask for is, I know there's a lot of angst about all of the plans that we're going through, but I think patience is probably the biggest thing that we really need to have as a community. We know in a normal school year, that first week of school is an adjustment for our kids, and there are things that go wrong and things that we got to work out. And this year is going to be, a much different year that way, and we're going to have bigger challenges to work through with all these new processes and safety procedures and so forth. So many things that we talked about today, but I guess I'm kind of an optimist. I feel like we've put the best plan we can together, knowing what we can know. And I have faith that this community is going to be behind getting our kids back into school and getting them into the structure and doing the best for our kids. So, if we as parents are positive and we offer constructive criticism when there's issues and support our children, I think this plan can really work well. It's not foolproof, and we know we're going to have to change it, and there's lots of factors that will make us change it. But in the parents that I've talked to, before we had this plan out, I've tried to express, let the process play out. Let us keep working through these issues. Let the teachers who know situations offer the feedback to help us out. Let us administrators and parents weigh in, and collectively, I think we can come together to really make this work. So. Jack and Bob and all your staff, Tom, thanks for all your work to get this to where it's at right now. We know we still have a lot of work to do, but I'm really positive that we're going to come through this okay, and this is a good starting point. So at this point, I'm going to make a little bit of transition because we're going to move on to the business part of our agenda. And while I appreciate all the attendance we have, you're all welcome to continue to listen on to the rest of the presentation, our meeting. It might be a little bit dry, so if you want to drop off, okay, we won't be offended, and we do really appreciate all of your time and feedback. So I hear all the beeps going out. Those are probably people who are moving on and enjoying the rest of the evening. So we will turn back to our agenda at this point.
And I'm going to be ending the YouTube feed at this time as well.
Okay, thanks, Jack.